Today we're going to learn about two new themes in English pronunciation, thought groups and emphasis. In the first scene of this video, you're going to see Ricardo, the new director of an NGO, speaking with his intern Alex. You're going to see in this scene how thought groups can play a very important role in the construction of meaning in English.
Woman without a man is helpless, or at least that's what culture with oppressive gender roles would say.
Did you just hear what the director said?
I did.
He said women without men are helpless. I can't believe it. That guy is totally sexist.
Yeah, well, I don't know him very well, but I don't like what I just heard. Who hired him?
So in the scene you just saw, the workers at the NGO passed judgment about the new director based on hearing the following sentence. Woman without her man is helpless. But they didn't have the whole story. Now we're going to go inside the office, behind the closed doors, to see what Ricardo and his intern Alex were really talking about.
Woman without her man is helpless, or at least that's what culture with oppressive gender roles would say.
Well, it's hard to judge other cultures, but I think most of us today do agree on what constitutes sexism.
Exactly, and that is precisely what our organization is trying to combat. Sexism as a barrier to human rights.
Now that you have a little more context, you can see what went wrong in the communication here. Because of the way the pauses were made in the sentence, a particular meaning was conveyed. We're going to call the placement of these pauses and the way they group the phrases in a sentence thought groups. So as you can see, changing the pauses in a sentence can change the thought groups, which can change the meaning. Now I want you to listen again to the same sentence that the director said, but with different thought groups. Let's see if you can notice how changing the thought groups changes the meanings. How many thought groups are in this phrase? Woman. Without her, man is helpless. And what is the difference in meaning from what the director said? Woman. Without her, man is helpless.
Woman without her man is helpless.
Men are helpless without women. A woman cannot survive without the help of a man. Let's do one quick exercise to wrap up our segment on thought groups. Where would you put a pause in the following sentence? And how would that sentence's meaning change without a pause at all? Let's eat, Grandma. Let's eat, Grandma. Now, see if you can predict where the thought groups will go in the first few sentences from the famous speech by Malala Yousafzai, winner of the Nobel Prize for her advocacy for universal education. Remember that thought groups determine units of meaning and are generally conformed by grammatical chunks. The pauses fall around clauses, phrases, transitions, or expressions.
Thousands of people have been killed by the terrorists, and millions have been injured. I'm just one of them. So here I stand, one girl among many. I speak not for myself, but for those without voice can be heard. They thought that the bullet would silence us, but they failed.
It's likely that this is not the first time you've noticed the importance of thought groups in English. And clearly, thought groups play an important role in constructing meaning. But that's not all. We're going to look at another concept in which thought groups have an important role. That concept is called emphasis. Now we're going to flash back to before Ricardo, the new director at the NGO, was hired. We're going to see him in his job interview. And I want you to listen in his responses for the thought groups, but also see if you can hear the emphasis in his responses.
Good morning, Ricardo. It's a pleasure to speak with you today.
Good morning, same here.
Thank you. Tell me, what made you interested in our NGO?
Well, I have already worked with a local NGO that deals with human rights, but I'm very interested in extending my experience to a national level.
That sounds like a logical next step. And Ricardo, your CV mentions that you helped write public policy regarding women's health rights. Could you tell me more about that?
Well, actually, it wasn't just health rights. It also included education goals.
Oh, impressive work. Our NGO definitely believes that it's important to support women's rights.
I agree. It is very important.
Yes. Well, it seems like your views and experience are a good match for our organization. But I would like to know a little bit more about what you hope to achieve as director of our NGO. So, for example, do you see yourself continuing writing policy, or would you like to pursue other areas?
I have a great deal of experience in writing policy, but I'm also interested in moving away from it. Particularly, I want to use what I learned to create new programs.
Good to know. Okay, once again, thank you very much, and we'll be getting back to you next week.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Of course.
As you can see, emphasis is an important tool to highlight key information when we speak. It works, in fact, kind of like a highlighter does. You can identify emphasis in a phrase by noticing which word or words get the biggest change in pitch and intensity. But coming back to our first theme, what is the relationship between this new idea, emphasis, and the first idea we talked about, thought groups? Listen to the following phrases. See if you can come up with a theory about where the emphasis falls relative to the pauses. Woman. Without her, man is helpless.
Woman without her man is helpless.
So if you guessed that the emphasis falls at the end of thought groups, you're correct. You will also notice that the words that get emphasis in a sentence tend to be what we call content words. These are nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs, those words that carry important meanings in a sentence, and not so much on words that we call function words, like prepositions and articles and auxiliary verbs. However, you'll notice that there are some other rules that also determine which words get emphasis in a phrase. We're going to look at some examples from the interview to see how those rules work. Rule 1. Contrast. Which words get the emphasis to show contrast?
Tell me, what made you interested in our NGO?
Well, I have already worked with a local NGO that deals with human rights, but I'm very interested in extending my experience to a national level.
Rule 2. Correction. Which words get the emphasis to show a correction?
That sounds like a logical next step. And Ricardo, your CV mentions that you helped write public policy regarding women's health rights. Could you tell me more about that?
Well, actually, it wasn't just health rights. It also included education goals.
Rule 3. Agreement. Which words get the emphasis to show agreement?
Oh, impressive work. Our NGO definitely believes that it's important to support women's rights.
I agree. It is very important.
Yes.
Rule 4. New information. Which words get the emphasis to show new information?
Well, it seems like your views and experience are a good match for our organization. But I would like to know a little bit more about what you hope to achieve as director of our NGO. So, for example, do you see yourself continuing writing policy, or would you like to pursue other areas?
I have a great deal of experience in writing policy, but I'm also interested in moving away from it. Particularly, I want to use what I learned to create new programs.
So, today you learned the following about thought groups and emphasis. Pauses are important to sending the message you intend to. Thought groups separate grammatical units to make speech meaningful. Content words usually receive the emphasis. The emphasis in a thought group tends to fall on the last content word in the group. And emphasis can express contrast, correction, agreement, and highlight new information. Thought groups and emphasis are a natural part of discourse in English, and using them appropriately can help you convey the message that you intend to. So, let's practice and see how you do.